Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Pat, and I will be the Zaner-Bloser moderator for today's informational webinar, Finding the Funding, 3 Big Ideas to Help You Raise Funds for Reading Language Arts, with our presenter, John Bluthardt. Before we start, there are just a few things you should know. To allow for John to be heard clearly, attendees' microphones have automatically been muted. Please use the question text box on your screen throughout the webinar to type in your questions. These will be used for our Q&A period at the end. Most audio and video problems you may experience during the presentation can be solved by closing other programs and applications you may have open on your computer, such as your email. You may want to check now and close them out if they are open. This session is being recorded, and assuming no technical difficulties, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording to review and share with colleagues in a few days. For those of you who may not know us, Zaner-Bloser is a long-standing publisher of English language arts resources and materials. From reading and writing to spelling and vocabulary and handwriting, along with the professional development to support each of them, our mission is clear: to support teachers and inspire students to do their best. As part of our ongoing commitment to partner with educators across the country, I am pleased to introduce you to our funding expert, John Bluthardt. John has over a decade of experience in educational funding with the Highlights Education Group, which includes Stenhouse Publishers, Staff Development for Educators, or SDE, and Zaner-Bloser. As Director of Funding, Grants, and RFPs for this group, he develops responses to requests for proposals from school districts and states, monitors local, state, and federal education funding and policy, and assists schools like yours in locating and developing funding proposals. Before that, John helped found a small educational publishing company and worked for 2 decades as a fundraising professional, where he wrote hundreds of funding proposals and provided training to educators in the grant writing process. We're pleased to have him with us today to talk about how educators can secure funding for reading language arts programs. Welcome, John, and at this point, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Pat, and welcome everybody again to Zaner-Bloser's fundraising webinar titled Finding the Funding, 3 Big Ideas to Help You Raise Funds for Reading and Language Arts. And thank you for taking the time, as Pat noted, to listen today to what we hope will be an engaging and practical webinar. So our agenda is very simple. We'll cover 3 topics that will provide you with some ideas and resources to jumpstart your efforts to raise funds to support your classrooms, your schools, or your district's reading and language arts programs. First, we'll look at raising funds through social media platforms like DonorsChoose. Second, our focus will be on private funding sources and strategies that you can start right after listening. And third, you'll leave this webinar with some carefully curated websites and resources in your pocket to help you use your time wisely. So before we start, what's 487? When I put the $ in front of it, maybe it's a little clearer. Next, when I say it's per teacher, maybe you've guessed. This is the average amount that a teacher pays out of pocket for classroom supplies and needs, according to the Federal National Center for Education Statistics. That's over $1.5 billion per year. So what we hope is that with this webinar, maybe Zaner-Bloser can help teachers and administrators look to private funders in their own networks and communities instead of their own pockets to support their classroom needs. And that's where crowdsource or crowdfunding ideas like DonorsChoose come in, and that's our first big idea. Here's a snapshot of the DonorsChoose funding opportunity, including how the site works, eligibility deadlines, and how to get started. How the site works: teachers post a project that they need funding for on the DonorsChoose website. Then teachers can share the funding request through social media and their personal school and community networks. Donors can then contribute any amount toward the cost of the item online. And then when the request is fully funded, DonorsChoose purchases the item and sends it and a thank you kit to the teacher. And donors can be anyone who sees the teacher's request online. It could be parents, community members, family members, local philanthropists, etc. Regarding eligibility, you're eligible to register if you're an educator at a United States public school or public charter school. You're employed full-time by the school district, and you work directly with students at least 75% of the time. If you're a private school educator, I'll mention some alternatives shortly. But most of what you're going to see here about DonorsChoose applies whether you're a private school teacher or administrator or public. Deadline, that's the great part about this opportunity and many others. This is ongoing. You can pretty much post a request anytime. And the last great thing about DonorsChoose is it's so easy to get started. You just hit the link and the site is carefully set up to help teachers post their requests. So DonorsChoose was actually started by a middle school history teacher about 17 years ago, and it's just become hugely popular. But it's still not universally known, and frankly, it's not always used effectively by those who do know it. About 10 years ago, when I first started talking about this site, only about 1/3 of teachers that I spoke to had heard of it. And today, only 1/3 of teachers haven't heard of it. So it's grown a lot. In fact, I can personally speak to the power of the resource. My daughter's 5th grade teacher posted her request for some kind of fancy smartboard projection system on DonorsChoose costing several $1,000s, and it was funded overnight by an anonymous donor, and I guarantee you it wasn't me. And this was in a high-poverty urban school, so it's a very effective site. Here's what DonorsChoose looks like. It's kind of like a personal website for your classroom fundraising, and this is just a screenshot of one part of this teacher's funding appeal. This request on DonorsChoose, though, looks pretty typical. It includes a collage of photos of the classroom, how much funding she's requesting, how many days she's got left in her request, and there is a time limit, and the fact that hers is a high-poverty classroom. It also includes a description of what she needs and a specific list of materials she's looking for, in this case, writing and handwriting supplies. But you can't just post a project, sit back and wait. You have to share it with your family, friends, neighbors, the entire school community, in short, basically your entire social network. And this is actually one of the biggest reasons that a DonorsChoose request might fail. The teacher really doesn't publicize it or promote it effectively. So DonorsChoose and these other crowdsourced funding sites, they make it really easy, though, to upload your contacts. Most sites also let your contacts share the project with their contacts, so it's just, I guess it's kind of like retweeting something. And actually, DonorsChoose has something called Facebook Automatic Updates, and that feature lets you automatically post to your Facebook newsfeed any new activity on your DonorsChoose project. It's also great that DonorsChoose and the other sites provide excellent fundraising tips to help you increase your chances of being funded, including sharing your funding request in your email signature, for example. So what I often say to teachers and administrators who are looking at this is don't be shy. People love to support good causes. It's kind of part of our DNA. And DonorsChoose, in fact, says that nearly 80% of projects requesting under $400 are funded within just a few months. But because DonorsChoose has become very popular in the past 5 years especially, it's more competitive than ever. And some experts are actually worried that donors have become kind of oversaturated, overwhelmed by the funding requests. So here are some ideas to tell a more compelling story that I've gathered to help you kind of stand out from the crowd. First, the crowdfunding site Incited advises, quote, strive to make an emotional connection to potential contributors by establishing a need, a solution, a positive outcome that contributors can visualize. It should paint basically, kind of like an appealing picture, a rationale for why you are uniquely qualified to lead that project once the funds are received. Second, and this is obvious, but focus on the kids. Pull out some quotes, highlight their needs. Very general. You don't want to focus on one student's needs to protect student confidentiality. And obviously post some pictures, get permissions, but pictures of those kids' faces are really a key to success, and even more so using video. So if the picture's worth 1,000 words, a moving picture is moving, right? It's basically all the research indicating that crowdfunding projects that include video see a significant bump in the results. The site PledgeSense, in fact, noted that participants see a 20 to 25% increase in dollars raised when they use video. So that's important. Themes and memes means pick projects, pick topics, pick titles that reflect current events that are hot topics. STEAM, for example, integrating arts with STEM, informational text, informational reading. These are all signature topics that, that donors will respond to. And in fact, I'd add one more, and that's what problem will you solve? What need will you address with this funding? Are you seeking vocabulary instruction because your students are struggling with comprehension? Do you need new informational reading resources that address your state standards and that prepare your students for the state assessments? And can you document this problem or need with data from assessments? Deploying this kind of data in a very simple funding request like this, like DonorsChoose, it helps prepare you for a key component in a traditional fundraising grant proposal, the need or problem statement. And I'll introduce that shortly. Beware, though, you don't have to post pages and pages of information on DonorsChoose. You don't have the room or any of the other sites. So you really have to highlight and summarize. So for example, 42% of my students are proficient readers. Can you help me reach the other 58%? You're getting the stats out there, but it's short and sweet. And also remember, these lessons apply whether you're a private school educator or a public school educator using these resources. One last note on developing that need statement. DonorsChoose has launched a goal of inspiring 1 million people to give $100 million to classroom projects from 100% of our country's high-poverty public schools in the next 5 years. So if your school or classroom qualifies as high poverty, highlight and repeat that throughout your posted project. Here's another great example, and this teacher does a really good job with her headline and appealing directly to parents of her students. The grammar is a little funky, but her message is really solid. The message, though, is tricky because she's describing the school community as underprivileged, but she's definitely onto something with her message and audience because as of this date, she's attracted 48 donors and she's halfway to her goal, which in this case included purchasing materials that she needs for handwriting instruction. So even those of you listening who are DonorsChoose or other crowdfunding veterans, you need to up your game and do more than just come up with that snappy title for the project. Also remember that unlike a traditional fundraising proposal to a private or government foundation, you're not so much competing with other projects, you're actually just trying to compel your personal network to invest in you and your students. And I also always say, is it crass to appeal for funds during holidays or your birthday? And absolutely not. That's just good marketing for a good cause. Okay, here's one. And in this case, rhyming is right on and alliteration is awesome. You can see what this teacher did with the headline. It's an excellent example of a headline and project that really grabs attention. In this case, a teacher looking for handwriting homework folders. So in preparation for this webinar, I scrolled through hundreds of DonorsChoose and other crowdfunding projects just to pick the most appealing ones. And most times, the ones that caught my eye also caught my ear with those clever headlines. Here's another. So, how would you like to raise funds to buy great children's books like these? I interviewed a teacher and her colleague from the Cedar Rapids School District in Iowa who posted a request for these titles and others, part of a reading program's book club that cost about $570. And this was her very first DonorsChoose request, and it was fully funded. So her advice was to break up the requests like this into pieces and post them separately. So she posted her request for 2 separate book sets in 2 separate DonorsChoose requests. So you can use DonorsChoose and other crowdfunding sites to add to a purchase your school or district has already made, for example, a reading program's book club or professional development. Here's another example. A New York City teacher used DonorsChoose to purchase iPad minis so her second grade students could access more of the digital content in a reading program. So DonorsChoose has a list of vendors that teachers can partner with to purchase what they need. For example, certain children's book vendors or classroom supply stores. But don't worry, you can also purchase any items not on that list of vendors through a simple special request process. And I've provided you with the link and additional information on how to do that. So before I move on, let me remind you to ask any questions that you have about the information I'm presenting in the question box in the webinar, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the webinar. There are about a half dozen or so sites with really good track records and traffic, so shop around, take the time to compare them. Most charge fees. DonorsChoose and Adopt a Classroom don't, which is why I like them. I really prefer DonorsChoose because it's intuitive and it's free. But if you're a private school teacher, you'll definitely need to shop around. I would suggest looking at a site like Adopt a Classroom, for example. Now, Adopt a Classroom doesn't let you fundraise for specific materials. That's kind of a downside. And they only allow access to a very limited set of vendors. But on the plus side, Adopt a Classroom has a literacy and language fund that supports English, ELL, ESL, and language arts classrooms across the country. So here are some other excellent education crowdfunding sites in case you are a private school educator or you don't qualify for other reasons to participate in DonorsChoose. Kickstarter, while it doesn't focus on education, is very famous. GoFundMe is too. And all of these sites I've looked at, and they've got good traffic and are responsible vendors. But as usual, the very best advice on how to use crowdfunding is from Edutopia, and that's the website launched by George Lucas of Star Wars fame. Here's the cover of a resource that Edutopia provides on crowdfunding, and we've provided you with the link to download this resource. Once you've tried your hand at these classroom crowdfunding sites, it's an easy next step to develop a short funding proposal to a private foundation or corporation, and that's our big idea number 2. So why? You've already developed and tested some of the parts and pieces you'll need. Here are 3 funders that we'll take a look at to highlight that: McCarthy Dressman, Dollar General, and the NEA. First, before we look at specific examples of funders that you can approach, let's take a look at recent data on what kinds of activities private funders do support. And this is according to Trends in Philanthropy Education. So good news, reading literacy is supported by 40% of education grant makers. PD is in the top 12 items that funders support too. Also, note that out-of-school time and after-school programs are the second highest topic funded by education funders. And that's another high-needs area for literacy and language arts materials. Now, the other small private foundation that supports classroom projects, the McCarthy Dressman Education Foundation, and its academic enrichment grants focused on student learning. I've provided you with a link to their application up the top there. And it's open from January 15th to April 15th each year. That's great. That's a lot of time to apply. Also note that one focus area of MDEF is curriculum that excites and challenges. So that's a great fit for any innovative big idea type resources and programs. Also note, the funder's website says that you should consider applying for a grant if, first, you've got a unique idea. So again, big ideas, as we say in our webinar. A unique idea for a project that will supplement your curriculum or after-school activity, or your students have big ideas for enrichment activities or a need for strengthening their academic experiences. Or last, you've got the facilities, the expertise, you've got the community behind you, but you need additional resources for materials, time, or transportation. And that's the great thing about these small private foundations. They tell you exactly what kinds of proposals they fund. In this case, in-class and extracurricular programs that improve student learning, and programs that nurture the intellectual, artistic, and creative abilities of children from low-income neighborhoods. On the website, they also include descriptions of proposals they have funded in the past, and they provide you with step-by-step application process. So as opposed to major national foundations or federal foundations, the federal government, they can take months, sometimes years, to develop a proposal. These small private foundations, they provide you with a lot of scaffolding, particularly aimed at educators, and proposals can really be developed in a short period of time. So here are the funding amounts for MDEF, small enough that it's manageable, but definitely big enough to have an impact. And here are eligibility requirements. Note that it's open to both public and private school educators. Let's take a peek behind the curtain to explore a project that was funded by this foundation at a school I've worked closely with in the past. I interviewed Marijke Conrad. She's the project director for A New Vision, using Google Cardboard to promote experiential learning at St. Columkill Partnership School in Boston, Massachusetts, which received a grant from MDEF. So it says background on the grant that she received. She applied for funding to purchase Google Cardboard technology. That's where teachers could design lessons that accentuate 21st century skills and kind of help students to evaluate and analyze images and videos viewed through VR, virtual reality. Students then work collaboratively to interpret these images. They make connections between the physical locations they're viewing and each subject. They then document their reflections in a class blog, and that allows other teachers and students to see what they've done and the impact the project's had. I've included here her response to my question, what is it about your funding proposal that made it unique? What made it stand out? Was it the idea, the way you expressed it, the team, all of the above? What made the difference? And I'm not going to repeat everything she said in this slide, but I want to summarize. First, she started with a great idea, in this case using instructional technologies such as Google Cardboard to enhance teaching and learning at the school. She also notes that the recommendation letters she included in the application helped it stand out. And third, and really importantly, she emphasized that brevity is the soul of wit and a funded application. Based on my 30 years of interviewing foundation staff, the people who read these things and fund them, they reward the ones that are comprehensive but concise. And last, and this is a point we made earlier in discussing how to craft an effective DonorsChoose request, she caught attention with a story, a great opening line. Okay, so here's our second small private grant maker, the Dollar General Literacy Foundation, and this is supported by Dollar General stores. Dollar General focuses on literacy, and I guess the story is the founder wasn't able to read until he was an adult, much later in his life, so he really emphasizes literacy, language arts, and reading. And that includes the 5 types of grants they make. Adult literacy, makes sense, kind of beyond words, a media grant. Family literacy, summer reading, and youth literacy grants. What's great about this example is that Dollar General stores, they're all over the country, so all you have to do is be located within 20 miles of a store to apply. And I've included links to everything you'd need to do that and to evaluate this funder, whether it's a good fit for you. And note that they fund both public and private schools. The funds are awarded to your school or district, though, not to you personally, as with DonorsChoose. So in your proposal, you really have to make sure that you're involving multiple teachers and classrooms, not just you. So let's pull back the curtain on this funder by sharing some insights from a school that received funding from Dollar General, in this case, a school in Asbury Park, New Jersey. I interviewed the district's grant writer, who noted that what really worked well for them was to draw on participating teachers, their experience, to help craft the funding proposal. And they made sure the project was unique and that it stood out. That's a theme we've been emphasizing. And second, the grant writer also noted that they used the language from their successful proposal in other future funding proposals. And that's a great lesson. You can use your experience developing a DonorsChoose posting to then craft a proposal to a small private funder, and then use that experience with other private funders going forward. In addition to the 3 funders I'm highlighting, I wanted to pop in a few funding news flashes, interrupt the presentation with some opportunities that might give you a little bit of a different angle, a little different opportunity. This is an unusual funding opportunity from Voya called Unsung Heroes. It's not your typical grant to help a school buy some books. This is kind of like a scholarship that would provide teachers and schools with $2,000 or more for innovative class projects. So that's pretty wide open, and that could include a number of creative classroom proposals focused on language arts instruction. And I've included background information and everything you'd need to get started. So our third small private grant is from the National Education Association, or the NEA. Here are the deadlines and guidelines. You do have to be a member of the NEA, but over the past 10 years, they've given over $7 million to fund over 4,500 grants. So your odds are much better with a funder like this that makes hundreds of grants a year. What I like about this funding source is that the application process is online, and the questions you answer are logical. Summary, goals, needs, activities, budget. The grant maker provides you with all the scaffolding and support you need to fill out the application. They tell you exactly what kinds of proposals get attention as well. And you can see that these questions build on some of the information one would provide for a DonorsChoose posting, so everything's linked here. However, while the NEA student achievement grants can be used for resource materials, supplies, equipment, technology, the proposed work and related materials should facilitate the development of students' critical thinking and problem-solving skills. The NEA says that the proposed materials have to play a central role in deepening student knowledge and habits of inquiry. So as we wrap up this section of the presentation, one final suggestion is to locate funders near your school or district. A noted politician once said that all politics is local, and the same can be said for small private funders. They often focus on local needs. So for example, I wrote a proposal to the GAR Foundation. They're based in Ohio, just like Zaner-Bloser, to help a school purchase a school-wide set of our company's supplemental language arts materials. In this year, a school's applying to the LeBron James Family Foundation, which focuses on Akron, Ohio, LeBron James's hometown, to support the purchase of our innovative online writing program. So as you search for funding sources and you think about those big innovative ideas, also think about keeping it close to home. All right, one more reminder at this point. Pose any questions you have using the webinar's question box, and we will get to them at the end. And that brings us to our third big idea. Resources and information that you can use to locate these local funders are as valuable as the grants themselves. There are hundreds of websites and resources, some that cost money to join, but here are the handful that in my 30 years of experience are worth the time and the money because they're free and they're easy. And these websites list sources of funding for classroom materials and professional development. They include eligibility requirements, deadlines, and funding amounts. So again, Edutopia is the best. They have a great item called the Big List of Educational Grants and Resources. And it's updated frequently, and I've provided you with the link. Second, Grants for Teachers is great because it covers smaller funders focused on classroom materials and ideas. I've included an example actually of a grant that it emailed to me. You kind of sign up and you get emails from them. And you can click on the hyperlink for additional information and the application. I think this one in particular is for reading and language arts. And then last, the National Association of Elementary School Principals and the professional development organization Learning Forward. They've got excellent grant information on their websites as well. In fact, for those of you who are principals or administrators, let me take a brief pause and highlight a few ways you can support your teachers in the quest for funding. So here are some roles and responsibilities that you can take as a school administrator, kind of to take the lead in the grant writing activity within your school or district. First, be the funding leader. A principal's direct involvement in fundraising logistics, planning, execution, it's really essential in a successful fundraising program. The principal starts by establishing the needs and sets the goals. In fact, according to Cynthia Francis Gensheimer, she's a parent and author of a very popular book called Raising Funds for Your Child's School. The principal serves as watchdog and sounding board for the entire school community. She notes, in fact, that principals understand the school's overall fiscal picture best and can help identify shortfalls. She also notes the principal's endorsement is also crucial to committing school personnel, from teachers to custodians, to any school project. Funders look for that. They want to see that the principal's on board. Second, be the idea generator. And by that I mean doing more than just generating a list of needs. Funding proposals need creative ideas and solutions. The principal needs to serve as kind of the CEO of idea generation for the fund development team. Third, delegate. So you've got to lead, you've got to be the idea person, but you don't have to write the proposal. Principals and administrators can take the time to build a grant writing team. And it could be PTA, the PTO, could be a lead teacher who's got some grant interests, and you get regular updates and emails. It's really one of the best and most comprehensive funding lists out there, and it's free. And I've provided you with the link to the website where you can sign up. Next, here are two of the best sources for information and training on how to write an effective funding proposal. The NEA Foundation offers a free online course to help educators navigate the grant writing process. It's called Grant Writing for Educators. And it's a course that introduces basically all the facets of grant research and writing. It's self-paced, can be completed by an individual or a team of teachers and administrators, and it's a great resource for both first-time grant writers or for educators who are looking to kind of tighten up their grant writing skills. I like it because the focus, the language, is really aimed at teachers and educators. Equally good is the Foundation Center's short course on proposal writing. Now, this resource doesn't use the same educator-friendly language as the NEA's. It's free, though, and it's the very best of its kind when it comes to honing your overall proposal writing skills. The Foundation Center resource covers how the proposal fits into an overall grant-seeking process, kind of what to include in the standard proposal. This is good tips for making each section stronger and stand out. What funders expect to see in your proposal and attachments, kind of their view. Some ideas for communicating with funders during the grant-making process. And lastly, additional resources, including sample proposals. So that's a great resource. One last thing I should mention is that the Foundation Center has the most comprehensive list of education funders out there, period. It's listed in something it calls its Foundation Directory. You can get it in print and online. Now, this costs money. It's the only one I'm recommending, or not recommending, but suggesting that does cost money. But many major public libraries subscribe to it, and they'll provide it for free. For example, mine does. Or maybe a nearby nonprofit organization in your community has a subscription. So remember when I showed you some of the questions that the NEA Student Achievement Grants asked, goals, activities, budget? Here's a snapshot of the categories that a typical private funder asks in their logical order, from the needs you're addressing to the goals and objectives you hope to achieve, right down to the resources and budget you need. It's logical. One element supports the other, which is why grant writing is sometimes called a logic model. And you'll see that language used a lot on funder websites. Each of the grant writing resources I just mentioned covers this process in much more detail, but I find it's helpful to introduce the concept here so you can kind of visualize what the grant writing process is like. In fact, I use this model in my everyday life to organize just about any proposal I make. For example, my high school senior daughter used this process with a little nagging and nudging from me to apply for some college scholarships. So it's really a universal resource. Here are some links to descriptions of how to use this process in your planning and grant writing. One last resource, and this one's from Get Ed Funding. And what I love about this is it's free. It helps educators locate funding and technical assistance, free webinars, online discussions, database of funders. But instead of going into it in detail, I just wanted to kind of scroll it like movie credits. You can access these topics directly from my presentation and their website once you've decided what kind of support you need. So, wrapping up, I hope you learned something new, or maybe you learned how to do something you already do a little bit better in this brief presentation. But my one first takeaway has been, have big ideas. Start small by trying them out on a crowdfunding site like DonorsChoose. Execute them well, learn from them, and then big idea number 2, move up the ladder to develop even better ideas and proposals to small private foundations. And then lastly, there is just a ton of free information out there for those in the know, including lists of funders targeted to language arts and reading. So don't spend any money on subscriptions or funding databases. The funding resources and strategies that I've outlined in the presentation, they're ones that you can access through web links. They should provide you with what you'll need to get started right out of the gate on raising funds for your classrooms or your schools' reading or language arts programs. So in sum, my message is, get out there, tell your story, find a funder that fits, and keep your classrooms and your schools and your students' needs at the top of the wish list. It will become more important than ever in the coming year. So that concludes this portion of the presentation. I'm going to hand it over to our coordinator, Pat, for some concluding remarks.
Thanks very much, John. We have a few questions that have come in, and attendees, if you have any other questions, this would be a good time to submit them in the question box on your screen. And if we don't get through all of them, we will include them in the follow-up email, which you will receive in a few days, along with the link to the recording of this presentation, so you will have access to that. So the first question that came in, I just answered. Are we going to get copies of this? And yes, you will. So watch for a follow-up email in the next few days. The next question that came in, John, what is the cut of DonorsChoose? In other words, how do they keep the site up to be able to continue that?
Yeah, they don't take anything from the donors, and so they survive on. They actually raise money to run the site, so it's kind of like a philanthropy in and of itself. So what I like about DonorsChoose actually is that, and a couple of the other crowdsourcing sites, they do not take a cut from the donors for administration or support. Now, some do. And I have to say, in fairness, that's detail, and the little comparison shop slide that I put up for the 3 sites that I profiled talks a little bit about that too. You know, if you're a private school educator, I can't say enough about Adopt a Classroom. If you're a public educator, DonorsChoose are great because there's really not a lot of cost. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, the second question, several of our teachers made accounts requesting the same program, but each one is only partially funded. Is there a way to combine the accounts?
Oh, that's a great question. The short, tough answer is no on the front end, but you can kind of let the posting expire and try again in a more consolidated way. DonorsChoose is very forgiving. So in other words, and that is a very common problem. Teachers, maybe multiple teachers in a school, will try to raise funds for separate pieces of a common program. And that does get tricky because one teacher might actually be fully funded and another might not. So based on what I know, DonorsChoose doesn't let you kind of, after the fact, combine those requests, but you can simply let them expire and try again in a more consolidated way.
Okay, and I would say related to that one, if there's more than one idea from a school, is it best to combine them up front into a single or to submit them separately at different times?
Yeah, that is very related, so that's probably the best advice and answer to the previous question, which is set that bar carefully. You notice I said that something like 80% of DonorsChoose postings of $400 or less are fully funded within a few months. So that's the data, and DonorsChoose is really great at that data. They keep track of everything. So I would say, you know, a rough benchmark would be if your project is more complicated or greater than $500, you're going to want to find a way to split it up. Either split it up over time, across teachers, being careful, again, to watch for whether one teacher is fully funded or not. But I would use approximately a $500 benchmark, not knowing anything about a particular teacher's social network.
Okay, thank you, thank you, John, for sharing this information with us today. It looks like we are out of time. Attendees, if you have further questions about funding opportunities or you need help with the proposal, please reach out to your Zaner-Bloser representative and discuss your needs, and he or she may be able to help you answer your questions, and they can definitely put you in touch with John to help you with identifying opportunities and providing additional support as you develop and submit your funding proposals. I hope you all enjoyed and got some information out of the presentation today. Watch for our next webinar in the early spring when John will walk us through the process of writing a funding proposal. We wish you all a great rest of the day and a good week, and thanks again for joining us. Bye.